Mr. Danielson will be filming us today. So thank you for being here, Bruce.
Okay.
Call the order, I guess. We'll get going.
Olson, Paikanen, Wallstrom, Wheeler, Myers.
Here.
Do you have an agenda? Are there agendas that we can look at?
I do.
Do you have an extra?
I do have a
You and I
couple.
can share one.
Yep. There's several. Thank you.
So approval of minutes. Well, we'll do approval of minutes first, and then a couple other things before we get into the regular agenda items. So approval of minutes from the last meeting. Somebody might shut down, please. I'll grab it. Thank you.
I'll motion to approve minutes from last meeting.
Second.
Any questions or further comment? Okay.
Paikanen, Wheeler, Myers.
Yes. So a couple things first. We have a new REMSA member, so I'd like to welcome Jo
Thank you.
for her first meeting. Jo, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
I'm a retired RN. I worked on heavy medical, surgical, and coronary care. I retired from McKinnon after 36 years in 2006, and I retired from the penitentiary with the Department of Health after 20 years, 4 years ago. And I'm very interested in emergency care, critical care, and hope I can be an asset to your team.
Well, welcome, Jo.
Thank you.
We'll go around the room and have everybody introduce. We don't do that every time, but I think with a new REMSA member, we want to make sure we do that. Also, just wanted to say congratulations to Chief Goodroad, your first meeting as fire chief, right? So,
Yep.
Congratulations. So, Mike, would you start for Joe's sake, please?
Certainly. Mike Bureau, Paramedics Plus.
Jessica Mundo with Metro Communications, the 911 Center.
Justin Faber with Metro Communications.
Greg Goodrow, Sioux Falls Fire.
Steve Fessler, Sioux Falls Fire.
Amy Marsh, Sioux Falls Fire.
Rich Miller, Sioux Falls Police Court.
Alicia Calero with the Health Department.
Julie Charbonneau, Health Department.
Gary Myers, REMSA Board Chair.
Rob Wheeler, REMSA Board.
Dr. Luther? Dr. Luther? Did
Jeff
you-
Luther, REMSA.
Steve, we have, I guess, sorry, Steve, you're new as well. I guess, I don't know if this is the first one I've seen yet, so
Yes.
are you going to be a new representative for fire? Or
Yes.
how's that going to work?
Yeah, I'm just promoting into the division chief role, taking over Brad's
Great.
position.
Oh, well, congratulations then.
Thank you very much.
I should have probably mentioned that. He's been acting as, in my position as I've been an interim.
Sure.
And then went through that process, just like the new division chief here last week. And Steve was our selection, so he will be taking over that position and then some of the same responsibilities. So everything that has to do with EMS, he'll have more say to that.
Okay,
So will you still continue, Brad, or be here, or?
We'll meet here as a director's level, here, but then probably not the medical board, unless there's some reason I need to for, historical thing or whatever, but certainly can, but that seems to be the way that was known before, as a chief to come to these, but not sure.
Well, welcome as well. Sorry, I missed
Thank
you
you.
in the first.
Thank you.
I also noticed that we do have a few visitors in the room, so we will, we don't have that visitor piece on the agenda, but we will make sure we have time for everybody to if there's any questions or concerns or anything that needs to be brought up from visitors, we'll have time for that at the end of the agenda, if you don't mind, so. Okay, so back to the agenda, annual meeting. And the first item on the annual meeting is election of officers, which we did plan to do today, but there's only 3 of the 5 of us here. I don't know, it's Joe's first meeting, and we have a quorum, but we don't have everyone here. So my suggestion would be to wait till next meeting and make sure that everyone knows that we need to do that next meeting for sure. But I don't want to make that decision. I want the 2 of you to weigh in on that as well, on whatever you think.
I think we should make.
Yeah, I'll second. I'll motion that to.
Okay? Do we need any further discussion on that then?
Do you want to make sure everyone's here?
I think, missing one is one thing. It just seems like, I hate to have 2 people plus Joe being the first person. I think those 2 factors together. I don't know, Joe, if you've had a chance to meet everyone, so I don't even know if it would be fair to you to say, who do you want to be in these positions if you haven't even had a chance to meet everyone yet, so. Yeah, we'll see if next meeting, if hopefully we have everyone or all but one, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
So Russ made a motion to postpone election of officers.
Until we have a full.
Anything for Pankinen, Wheeler, Myers?
Yes. And then the Board of Health member, that's something that a member of the REMSA board, we decided a while back that it should be maybe just for, to switch things up a little bit so everything doesn't fall on the chair, somebody else represent REMSA at the Board of Health meetings. That's is that twice a year?
4 times a year.
4 times a year, quarterly. So we would at least like to have somebody represented, or because that was Aaron. Aaron, as the vice president, was doing that before. So we want to make sure that we have a representative for the next board meeting, which will happen before our next REMSA meeting.
What, are those on Thursdays, or when are those exactly?
When are those, Alicia? I don't know.
They're quarterly and they are on Thursdays. I'll have to send you the exact months.
Are they kind of evening-ish?
No, they're noon.
They're new as well.
Lisa told me the next one is the 13th of July, so they must be second Thursday.
So we'll name the hat for that.
Okay. Ross would like to throw his name in the hat for that?
Well, I think that's
I think that's
a
good enough for
motion.
me, yeah. That's a motion for Ross then, to be the representative of REMSA on the Board of Health.
I second.
I guess I'll have to make some motions in seconds since there's only 3 of us.
Pankinen, Wheeler, Myers.
Yes. Thanks,
So
Ross.
the next one's the 13th. You will hear from Lisa. She sends out agendas and
Where does it meet?
here downstairs in a conference room in this building.
All right, any unfinished business? Okay, seeing none, we move on to new business. First is rate increase.
You might already know that. The ambulance contract in the RFP document on page 41 states the annual rate increases will be the greater of 3% or the increase of the CPI for any given year. All changes in transport fees must be approved by city and REMSA. I did receive on June 15th a request from Paramix Plus for a 3% rate increase. And you have those numbers, and you have a copy of that request. The number compared to is the CPI for all urban consumers, and the May to May, which was the most recent on the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor, is 1.9%, and so the 3% adjustment is applicable. The new rates are listed there, what they will be after the 3% increase. And so I believe the process from last year is you review this if you have any questions. And then REMSA approves, and then this goes to the city council where it has to be addressed as an ordinance because rates are always set by ordinance.
So we would just be making a recommendation one way or the other for the council?
Well, the way it reads in the contract is that the rate increase must be approved by both city and REMSA. So you vote approval and then for it to go to the city.
Okay.
And here is the CPI info if you need to see it.
So again, this is in the contract, the standing contract that we have, that annual rate increase is contractually obligated, and it is one or the other of those, whichever is greater, the 3% or the CPI. And you said the CPI was?
1.9.
1.9.
Yes.
Mike, anything to add? Joe or Ross, any questions?
They did do one last year at the same time, I believe, if I
Yep.
remember correctly, and
It was 3% last year as well, I believe, right? The CPI was lower than 1.9 last year, I think.
You know, I didn't look that up, what it was last year. It was probably in the minutes.
yeah. I'll motion to approve the rate increases proposed to the city council.
I'll say.
ready for roll?
Yeah, any further discussion? Okay,
Pankonen? Yes. Wheeler? Yes. Myers?
all right. MPDS update?
Justin?
All right, yeah, so we're going to just do a quick run through on an EMD determinant code that we talked about at medical board for change. For those that may not be familiar, what an EMD determinant code is when the dispatcher takes a 911 call. They'll run through our medical protocol, they'll ask scripted questions. Based on the answers they get to that question, determines what the patient's condition is and then assigns an EMD determinant code. The one we're talking about today is 12 alpha 2. So what this is a patient who has had a seizure. They're no longer seizing. The patient's breathing effectively. The only unknown on this determinant code is we don't know if the patient has the seizure disorder or not, if they've been previously diagnosed or not. Since it's an alpha level determinant code, the Academy's recommendation is for a cold response, meaning no lights, no sirens. When we went through this last year, we assigned it a hot response and then decided we would keep an eye on it, look at all these calls, see what patient criteria was, and see if we had any critical patients on this determinant code. And after, I don't know, several months of looking at them, myself and Julie and Dr. Luther, there wasn't any. We found all of them to be stable patients, and we were all comfortable with changing this from a priority 2, which is a licensed sirens response, down to a priority 3, which is flow of traffic. And we did discuss it at length at medical board, and they were all comfortable there as well.
So the medical board approved the change, so after any discussion, what we need you to do, remember that language, is you adopt the
Okay.
change.
Dr. Luther, anything to add from medical board, medical director standpoint?
No, I think it's, with the frequency of these calls and, taking into account the Academy's input, and also it's a public safety thing. So I think that it's a good change and a safe change.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's always important. We need to weigh how the response speed or priority against, putting vehicles out there trying to get through traffic. And that's always potentially a dangerous situation, so. Okay, any questions? Joe or Ross? So entertaining a motion to adopt.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay,
Pankonen? Yes. Wheeler?
Yes.
Myers?
yes. Nerve agent exposure SOP.
Somebody want to talk about that from fire, or it was approved at fire? I have, or I can.
So, we were, on our hazardous material response, we have added, or want to add the antidote, which is a duodot, auto injector, which is similar to the EpiPen that you approved a year ago for us. And so with wanting to add those to our hazardous material response, we needed to add a protocol into Sioux Falls Fire Rescue. And so this is the protocol that we brought to the medical board a month or so ago that indicates, and it's a standard, pretty national standard of when to apply the use of these devices. So these would be available for self-administration for if any of our responders are exposed, or for individuals that are exposed to any kind of a organophosphate or other bioterrorism type of attack.
Where will these be kept, Amy?
There'll be a cache on each of our hazardous materials units, one at Station 7 and one at 2, and then we will keep the supplies at headquarters in a locked, so if they are used, they will have replacements.
Dr. Luther, anything to add there?
No, I think for force protection, this is we had this similar thing years ago. Now the duodot is out there. It's if we had an instance, like a crop duster crash or something like that, and there was some exposure, you could use it in that, so not necessarily just, in some kind of a bioterrorist attack. But yeah, it's kind of resurfaced. It's a good thing for our force protection, particularly in the hazardous material situations and decontaminations, those sorts of things.
And medical board didn't have any concern there? Yeah.
No.
Okay. So adopt again? Any questions? Okay. Entertaining a motion to adopt then.
A motion to adopt.
I second.
Nerve agent exposure.
Further discussion? Mike, I didn't ask if you had anything to add to that.
We do not. I mean, at the first half of this atropine, there was already a protocol that kind of addresses this and what to do with the mass casualty from our side within the REMSA guidelines. So we're completely comfortable. An agreement for force protection is probably a pretty important step to be taken.
Thanks. We have a motion and a second.
Hankinen? Yes. Wheeler?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes. Sioux Falls PD use of naloxone policy.
You've already adopted this policy, but since it was adopted, the police department has asked the medical board to broaden the use. So this was going to be just available to your crime lab people.
Originally, crime lab and narcotics officers because they're increased risk of exposure to opioids and so forth. But as time has gone on over the last several months, kind of looked at nationwide, there seems to be an increase, or the rate of exposure of officers getting exposed to this has increased quite a bit. And also the canines, the canine officers, and just the public in general. So we originally wrote this policy with the intention that we would expand it to all officers, uniformed officers potentially in the future, so the policy didn't need any changes. But we're looking at making that change now and having that issued to all our uniformed officers so it's available. And we received some money from the state to fund that.
And right before this went to the medical board, the DEA actually put out a press release, again, pushing this issue, because there have been officers and paramedics with exposure to this heroin that's cut with fentanyl, or the other new synthetic opiates that are out there that are so strong that even just skin contact can result in overdose. So, press release if anybody wants to see it. The medical board approved broadening this policy, and so we'd ask that you adopt that as well.
So this is just for officer use, basically, then, right?
You know,
Primarily?
I mean, if they have a patient or someone they come across, we're certainly willing to use it then too. Primarily started looking at originally for officers, but obviously it can aid a lot of different people or
Right.
a lot of different. So
Other responders around,
yes.
yeah. Dr. Luther, anything to add?
Well, again, we're broadening the scope everywhere. I mean, this is an epidemic across the country. Our sheriff EMT deputies have it on board now, looking at rural ambulances as well, and reviewing the reports and the information I get. I know the sheriff's deputy has used it, EMT has used it once in the last month with some response and some benefit. I was reviewing calls this morning and reviewed 3 calls where Narcan was used, and 1 had made a difference. Again, when you come up on these patients' unknown problems, altered consciousness, it's just part of our sequence now to rule out. Narcan isn't going to hurt anyone, but certainly it could have reversal effects for respiratory depression in those that have opioid overdoses. And it's actually available over the counter for people to buy if they have family members or whomever, or a concern about someone close to them that has an opioid addiction. So it's really of epidemic proportions across the country.
And medical board didn't have any concerns, right?
No,
Yeah,
no.
as I remember. Mike, anything to add there?
No.
Questions? How is it administered?
It's the nasal.
Okay. So again, entertaining a motion to adopt, I think.
I'll motion to approve the Narcan policy for Sioux Falls Police Department.
I'll second. Any further discussion?
Hankinen?
Yes.
Wheeler?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes. Performance report, ambulance performance report.
This is that draft report I gave you as you came in. I know that you're aware of last year's report. The format is very similar. The information has been updated. This is not quite how the report will look. This is a draft. So it will go to multimedia here for some updating. This is contractual, so the ambulance contract requires an annual report from REMSA to the city detailing response time performance, clinical performance, system improvements that have been undertaken, information on workforce stability, pricing compliance, and reporting compliance. And so you'll see that each section is addressed. Response times, I know you're well aware because they're reported here at every meeting. The clinical measures, there's some information there from Dr. Luther, some clinical measures that we include that are basically easy for lay people to grasp, so they're included here. Information about Mission Lifeline, information about the CARES registry and how excellent cardiac arrest outcomes are here in this community. Some information about other clinical measures. Another piece of information from Dr. Luther. Then there's a section on system performance, so we talk a little bit about the pulse process and how non-compliant calls are reviewed. Just an update again for the council that this is a system status management system and what that means. A big improvement in the last year, excuse me, for system performance was the addition of Pit Crew CPR, which is a multi-agency effort, but we did include it here with information, so it goes in this report. Also, a synopsis of the pilot program for resource allocation, that pilot program that was undertaken that then became standard operating procedure, because we have found that to be a valuable system improvement as well. Some specific new information about workforce stability, employee engagement survey, some numbers, and some information about retention rate that we will use for benchmarking going forward. Compliance for pricing and revenue, the same processes are in place, so that it will look very much like last year. Information reporting, there's a long list in the contract of information that needs to be reported, which is part of what Mike reports to you at every one of your meetings. And so the summary is that REMSA finds contractor performance to be acceptable. The required services were delivered while improving system quality, because we outlined those improvements. Specific system improvements and actions to improve workforce stability are reaping benefits. I kind of skipped over it, but there is specific information here about the wage increases that have happened over the past year and how successful that has been in recruitment and in retention. There have been so back to the summary, there have been no breaches of the contract. The required performance security remains in place, so the bond, the $1 million bond that's in place in finance is current. The insurance requirements are current, so we have proof of insurance. And then we look forward to Paramedics Plus's next year of service to the community. So this is just the report finishing up the second year of service under this 5-year agreement.
And this does not become public until it is presented to the council, is that correct? Which will be which meeting?
July 11th, I believe.
Any questions?
Did you guys get a chance to read, or do we need to pause so you can keep reading?
Should we take a few minutes?
I got through all of it. I was just
Okay.
reading the back summary page.
I was kind of looking at where it is you were going, so.
Okay.
You don't need any action from us? Or do we need to
You
approve
do
this
need
now?
to approve it, because it is a report from
Medical
REMSA.
board has looked at it or not? Is it going
No,
to the
Dr.
next?
Luther has looked at it for the clinical portion, because I didn't have all the clinical data when they met last, so.
Okay.
But the majority of this is contract compliance. It's yours as opposed to medical boards.
Dr. Luther, anything?
No, I could say that the performance indicators on the clinical side of things are very good. I'm very impressed.
Okay. That CARES data is amazing.
It is.
Yeah, do you know a little bit about that? Is it more of, we're pretty good for the state, right, with the CARES program?
Sioux Falls is the only program at this point that reports to
Okay.
to CARES. Now, there's been some talk about the state as a whole state joining CARES, but I don't think anything's happened there yet.
I think the state is doing some reporting or data collection. I've not seen any reporting, and I think they decided not to do the full CARES registry, but rather to focus on the Lucas devices and what difference they might be making. So a little different focus. I encouraged them to join the CARES registry. because there are several states that have.
Yeah, what's the reasoning why they don't, why would you not want to?
It's a lot of work. And
Yeah, finding the data is a lot of, it's not
To
just,
have that.
yeah, it's not just something you look at one or two indicators and then put it on, report it. It's some work. The other thing is you're really putting yourself out there. If you look at the survival rates for CARES at, I don't know if we should say what it is because
Yeah,
it's
go ahead.
15% survival rate for Sioux Falls. I think the national is something like 9 or 10.
it might be about 10 this
Yeah.
year. But the number that systems benchmark with each other is what's called the Utstein survival, because these are the patients who basically have a chance of survival. So a cardiac arrest that's witnessed and that the victim is found in a shockable rhythm. And so that's what system by system, everyone agrees that that's the benchmark that's used. A bunch of cardiologists got together and decided this years ago. In Sioux Falls, that's 55%. And the all CARES number was, what was it, Gary?
33.
33. And keep in mind that the all CARES number is better. You can't call that an average because anybody who participates in CARES, they're already probably doing better than average because they're looking, because they're measuring. So the fact that that's 55% of people with a witnessed cardiac arrest who are found in a shockable rhythm leave the hospital neurologically intact in Sioux Falls.
That's amazing.
It is. It really is
Well,
amazing.
And if we look at as recent as the early 90s, before the advent of public access to EDs and public or bystander CPR and what we've changed with breathless CPR, those sorts of things, it's phenomenal. And if you look at the city, who's been very progressive in our AED and public access program, and now Pulse Point, and then just recently, and I don't know if everyone's heard of it, and Steve and the chief can talk, or Amy, more about that, is our verified medical responder program. Again, we're the only second city in the country that is doing this, and this is a program whereby currently it's all firefighters, off-duty firefighters. They've been issued AEDs, Philip AEDs, and they're able to receive an alert where they're able to respond to private locations where cardiac arrests occur, actually where most of those occur in the home or in private settings. So we're able to see of these 50 individuals what kind of response, which I think is going to be very impressive. So those folks are also interested in our CARES data, and I think this would be an adjunct to that too, providing more information. So I think our numbers in this community are going to improve yet even further with respect to cardiac arrest. I'm very, very impressed with this program.
The participation in CARES is mandated in the ambulance contract, so it's something that we as a system have been participating since 2007. We were one of the early CARES participants, but our contractor is mandated to provide all the information that we need. And it's not just ambulance information. We get information from the police department, from dispatch, from fire. Those excellent statistics here in Sioux Falls are really a measure of the entire system because it is a system of care. So it's something that everybody in the system can be proud of. Our system does a great job with these calls.
Cool. Any questions? Anything to add, Mike?
No, I just, other than the fact that I think that once again, coming back to ideas like breakthrough CPR as a total system project, just goes to point out that this begins from first dial all the way to hospital discharge. So not only the people in this room, but as well it speaks to our hospital partners as well and their roles in this overall. So
Yeah, absolutely.
a total system approach, all partners.
Thanks. Anything else? So we need to move approval then.
Yeah, and I think we'll approve as a draft because it's not in its final form, although the text, the numbers won't change.
Numbers, okay. Format may change a
Format will
little.
change.
Format will change.
Okay.
He's right. I'll motion to approve the contract performance report.
I'll second.
It's been you or me, so.
Yeah, your pick.
Any other further comments? Good.
Ankinen?
Yes.
Wheeler?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes. Any other new business?
I guess something I just would like you to think about, whenever we do have a new board member, we usually address whether this is still the best meeting date and time. And, you know, historically, this meeting, well, it used to be at 10 in the morning, it was at 10:30, it's been at noon, evenings are a possibility. So perhaps think about that, and let's try and bring that up when you have your annual meeting, when you do election of officers, just to validate that this works or see if there's a better date and time.
Okay. Something popped in my head there, but I lost it.
My fault.
No, that's probably wasn't that important. Any other new business then? Okay, provider reports, Metro Communications.
If you ever want to come in to observe, if you want to sit, or if you just kind of want us to give you a short rundown, you can always come, and that's true for the other members as well. If you ever want to come in or just come visit about something, just contact one of us. So, yeah, anytime, we're open 24/7. Other than that, we're in compliance. We don't have anything to report.
Hey, how's staffing going?
We're fully staffed,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Good job.
We're trying to, we're staying positive because of the Zerker change in February. We really don't want to train somebody on our current system and then force them to go to that software change. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that we won't have to hire until after that changeover. That would be rough for that new person, so.
Oh, good job.
Any other questions that you have?
Okay, thank you. PD.
We need to cover already.
Okay. Questions? Fire?
Just the verified responder, Dr. Luther already spoke of. And we have just recently on the 19th implemented a new patient care reporting system, with our Zoll system, so we're working through those bugs right now.
Sure.
How many officers or fire department personnel are on the pulse point now? Do you have a number?
On the verified,
Yeah.
we've got 54 individuals signed up to do it off duty. And they are all within city limits.
They have to be within the city, right?
Yes.
Or living, or an address within the city, right?
They have to be located, to be able to use that and to use the ADA, it must be within the city limits.
Okay.
We have some outside the city limits that are signed up for it. They didn't receive an AED. There was a limited number of AEDs. We had more people than we had AEDs available to fill up. So we just limited those that had the AEDs to those that were in the city limits. And that's where it's going to notify those, within the city limits. But we thought those that are outside, sometimes, they're in, they're coming to work, they're doing things, they're here. So if they wanted to be part of that, they could certainly be part of that program.
Okay.
How many activations have you had?
5 so far.
And how many responses?
One of the responses, the individual was in station working when he got the activation. The other ones, I'm not exactly sure right offhand, the total responses.
I know we have like a monthly call to follow up on these, so I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll get that. But 'cause I want to be able to note those in the CARES, in the notes, so that when we go back and do some reporting in the future, I'll have that information already captured.
Yeah, that's an exciting thing for our community. We've had, being the second in the nation, there was a lot of cities, major cities, that were looking at having this, be part of their community. And through our connections there with Pulse Point as being part of that, organization early on, we were one of the very first few within the nation that had Pulse Point. So in that relationship, and our success here and just in the system, it's been good. It's going to be a good thing.
Yes.
You had some big hitters wondering why. St. Louis fire, San Diego fire. Why is this in Sioux Falls, South Dakota? Well, it's because of that pulse point, that connection. So
Well,
this
because
is
all the
great.
players here are so committed to the system of care.
Pretty awesome deal.
Is there an end date, or is it a pilot? Like, is there a range, or is it just going to keep going until?
They'll just keep going. Again, it's a pilot program on their end. They've got, the next city is going to be Madison, Wisconsin. So I think they're looking at those 3 cities, our 3 cities as pilot programs, and then it's successful already, so it'll just continue on from there. We'll have other cities that'll jump on board. But yeah, it is truly, kind of a pilot program for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Very neat.
So is it I know Pulse Point itself, anybody can sign up for that now within Sioux Falls. Is it a different app that the verified responders using, or how does that work?
It's the same app, but there's a piece that they download from the device they're going to use, and that's what attaches and lets it know that you are the verified responder.
Okay.
And then you'll be notified then when it's in a residence.
So
There's
then-
a second layer within
Within the app.
the app itself.
So Pulse Point has always sort of had that ability to know where the emergency is
Right.
in, not in a public area, because right now it's just public area. It's always kind of had that ability, and this takes advantage of that then, really to the highest degree.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Paramedics Plus. No, actually, more than one.
So to begin today, so this would be for a reporting period of April and May. June will of course be after June has ended. So to begin, normally with training and education. At this time, going through this 2-month period, I moved on into our training pipeline itself. 1 basic full-time EMT, 1 full-time paramedic, and 1 part-time EMT basic as well. This is a bit of a reduction than we've seen over the last couple months. Part of that reason is that back in March we had such a large orientation class that we had moved through those part-time employees. We were still working them through the process. So to have the appropriate field training officers to get them in through professional development caused us to have to slow down the pipeline in terms of hiring and push the people off over a couple months in terms of start date. Hospital interactions at this time, nothing to report between any of the 3 hospital systems at this time. Everything seems to be fine. I have nothing new to report at that time or at this time. Accreditation is still complete. At this time, there's nothing further required other than updating the normal forms as required for accreditation, though I will suspect that within the next couple of months, it'll be time for us to start looking at and preparing that process because it is such a huge process to go through CAS accreditation. Technology, all interfaces are functioning. The Zerker transaction continues as well. Additionally, it looks like at this time, the Zerker interface is also going to begin work in final negotiations with Zerker on that has gone, because of course we're required to do the interface ourselves. So where city government itself is included inside the Zerker, Paramedics Plus is of course required to pay for our interface. So that involves some negotiation between our party and along with our vendors, along with the Zerker. So it appears that that was signed and it's moving forward.
What is Paramedics Plus's amount? I mean, what do you have to pay for that? If you don't mind me saying or asking, what do you have to
It's
kick into that?
off the top of my head.
Round numbers is fine.
Round numbers. It's in the upwards of tens of thousands of dollars.
So was that?
It's quite a large number.
Yeah, was that something that, I mean, you knew about that transition for a bit, but.
We knew about it some, but you have to remember that we already, going into coming here, we created first the New World interface.
Mhm.
So we just got done finishing the cost, of course, that's budgeted through, and paying that off. But at this time now, we've had to go in, and this was an unbudgeted item. I mean, we were aware that the interface was coming, but we had no idea what the cost is or the timetable was until the final negotiations with Zerker was finished this year. So it's not like we had a long delay time to figure that out as a capital and to budget appropriately. But we were able to do it, and we did it, and we're happy to go forward with it. So it will be a good thing. We'll also continue to report to you. It'll be some changes. They're 2 different systems. The interfaces are drastically different. And in terms of how they get the same information, of course, is different as well. But we should be able to still deliver the same information.
Does that require a staff transition training for you as well?
Yes, it does.
And so the hours into that as well?
Yes, so we have some additional overtime costs, because of course we can't run Zerker training while we're running in-system calls at this time, because we have to be able to report to you accurately, so we can't be using two separate systems.
Right.
So we've moved a group of super users made up of supervisors to kind of work through that so that they can work as a super user. So we're in the process of getting that built up, and then they'll do some work with Metro Communications here fairly soon on some test calls, and along with just kind of going through it, as I believe fire department and BD have some people who are also doing similar job requirements, just kind of walking their way through the program to better understand it and get closer to transition.
Is there a date picked already? This might be for Jess, I don't know, but is there a date, like flip the switch and
February 28th, maybe?
there is a date anyway? that-
There is a date.
Yeah.
It's February 20 something. So, and the training starts, I think, probably January. It really hits heavy for all different portions of Zerker, and so the police department has several sessions. We'll have 11 hours, I think, for each employee that we have to fit in there. It's extensive,
Heavy transition.
yeah.
Well, good luck with that. A little ways off, obviously.
Vacation.
Thanks, Mike, for entertaining some extra questions.
No problem. Moving into retention as requested by you earlier this year. April and May full-time employee retention was 100%, both EMT, paramedic, and non-field staff. And I will stop there in case there are any other questions before we move on.
Any questions? Okay, compliance report.
Certainly, we'll begin with April. As you can see, April priority 1, 97.22%, 35 compliant calls out of 36 total calls for service. Priority 2, 98.96 with 572 compliant calls out of 578 total calls per service in priority 2. Priority 3, 96.82, that's 518 compliant calls out of 535 total calls per service in that priority. Priority 4, 100% at 9 compliant calls out of 9 calls per service. And priority 5, 99.15 out of 116 compliant calls out of 117 calls per service.
And what was the total calls during April then? So I don't have to do the math in my head.
Certainly, total calls 1,275.
And has that priority 5 number gone up again?
That priority 5 number has gone up and gone significantly from year to date. So
Yeah.
last year we were in the neighborhood of approximately 4 P5s. So as of 2016 April, that was the roughly the number we're looking at, was about approximately 40.
It seems like every time you report that one goes up and up.
Well, that's a change in the system.
Yeah.
And in the way that we're doing inter-facility work, in the way that the system requires inter-facility work, so. Moving on to April outliers, there were 3 in total, a P2, a P3, and a P30. Questions on outliers?
No P1s.
No P1s. May compliance 2017, priority 100%, 41 out of 41 compliant calls. Priority 2, 99.52 with 623 compliant calls out of 626 calls per service. Priority 3, 97.25, 566 compliant calls out of 582 total calls per service. P4s again, 100% of 15 out of 15, and priority 5s 100% of 151 out of 151. And once again, rise in P5s, and last year in May we averaged about 60 P5. So
What was the total for May?
1,415 calls.
So getting busier, summertime.
Yes, 200. Yeah.
Any questions on compliance there?
Moving on to May outliers, 2 priority 3s.
And those have been discussed in calls already, correct?
Correct. And fully reported.
No questions? Do you concur?
Those are the same numbers that I that I have from my calculations, yes.
Thanks, Mike. If no other questions? Okay, Secretary's report.
I have nothing additional.
Should I ask one more time?
No.
Medical Director's report.
Tested 2 medics this week, new hires, one at the staff level. Those are, typically the process is a kind of a meet and greet. I get their information from background, a little bit of information, where they've trained and what kind of experience they've got. They've already been through the process that REMSA has. Julie's done, checked their background and made sure they got all their alphabets and national registry. The fellow that's coming on, I'm pretty impressed with. I usually don't hit too hard on the guidelines with them when we test them, but I think that's this particular fellow will be a great addition for them. This morning I tested one at the senior level, which is a much more rigorous process. Their field training officer has been involved, and they submit a field training officer's manual, which is a thick manual of the process, day-to-day activities, oversees their interventions, and gives us an idea of just how they are out in the field. They also take a written examination. I go over, Julie pulls a list of charts, random with some targeted charts, trauma, cardiac arrest. Those were all reviewed with the medic. Again, I think this individual is going to be a great senior medic, good addition to the system. I also reviewed all of the cardiac arrest calls, all of the rapid sequence intubation calls. Those are sent through ShareFile. Every day I get an email alert, and Julie compiles those and I review them. All of the pit crew CPR. The pit crew CPR, if you recall, is in entirety. You have police department there performing one leg of the function. Sioux Falls Fire and Rescue and Paramedics Plus. We've been watching every one of those since we implemented, I think in January, I believe, or February sometime. With the iGel, that's what I was most important. And remember, the iGel is how we had that. It's an intervention, an airway intervention that we have Sioux Falls Fire and Rescue do, and it's a quasi-definitive airway, but it really drastically reduces the amount of time that chest compressions are interrupted. And so I'm anxious to see some of the outcomes from that, and it's a little early, but I think that's going to be, so far it's working very well, and I'd like to see that promulgated out into the county. The county, as you know, is revising their ordinance to reflect not just recruitment and retention of volunteers, but also the medical provision. We're going to look at all of the ALS calls. There's been 4 work groups assigned out there. Been a lot of great collaboration and cooperation amongst the services, and the state has now they're signed a contract with a vendor, and the name escapes me, for a new electronic patient care recording process.
ImageTrend.
Imagetrend or
ImageTrend.
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 Okay. Anyway, so as we go forward in the county, hopefully that we're able to unify our guidelines and protocols. So we've got a lot of good input from the users that are out there, and hopefully we can get some kind of a standardized format for reporting back to the county. So that's kind of what I've been. I can't remember last time EMS week, that was in May. I don't know if we talked about that at the last meeting, but I think it was one of the best we've seen, at least with respect to the social media activity. So I think that was very successful. Almost every day there was something mentioned about somebody doing something.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We missed last month's meeting. We had to cancel last month's meeting, so we never got a chance to really talk about it. So, yeah. Any questions for Dr. Luther?
Other than that's what I got.
No questions?
No questions.
So before we move into adjournment, you'll have to, I'll apologize ahead of time that obviously we have some folks that have come today, and I think we've said several times that, if anybody has any questions or concerns and want to join a REMSA meeting and be part of it, have any comment or questions or anything like that, please come to the meeting. So I want to take the opportunity to do that now. We don't typically have anybody come to visit, so a little unsure of how to proceed, so again, bear with us. But I think it's probably appropriate to say that I don't know that we could take any action on anything today. So if you have anything that you just want us to know, that's probably as best we could do today. But if there's anything that needs to be followed up on, we will do that, on the next meeting or as appropriate. Again, I'm not sure exactly how to handle what might or may not. Maybe you're all here just to view and don't have any comments. I'm not sure. But again, this is not something we typically do, so bear with us. I'm not even sure how to start. Maybe I'll just start on that side of the room. So whoever on that side of the room, if you have any questions or comments.
I'm Josie Alpers. I just had a question. It's just been understanding you were giving statistics on response time and missed calls. I didn't know if the 980 calls that occurred at the same time, all the ambulances were in some form of transportation, if that counted against the statistics, or did that not count against the statistics?
So say that again. I want to make sure I understand.
When there is no ambulance available, and the ambulances are actually doing something like transporting patients, does that count against the statistics for their not having an ambulance available? Because I guess there was a history of stating something's on the way, but there's no ambulance available.
All calls are included in the statistics, and the response time clock for the call starts when the information is available to do the dispatch. So when the initial page goes out, whether it's an ambulance unit that's wheels start turning, or that, as you referred to it, a 980 series page goes out telling the crews there's a call as soon as you're available, that starts the clock.
And how do they decide when not to, for example, East Side?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? Are you a member of the media?
No.
Okay, I just really want to make sure that we have, if there's any visitors versus media
No, I'm
opportunities.
sorry, I'm just a visitor. I've
Thank
been
you.
asked
Okay.
through a steering committee to ask some questions, and that's why I just wanted to get the information.
Please, yes, thank you. Please.
Because I was unaware that Paramedics Plus goes outside of the city limits, and so I wanted to get information about how that is handled between, for example, on the east side where I live, MedStar versus Paramedics Plus. Because there's been incidents where Paramedics Plus doesn't come for an extended period of time, and yet MedStar is available and willing to come, but they're not allowed to apparently until they get a special request.
Yeah, that's more of a, I think, a county issue. So you're talking about calls that are in the county? Or-
Yes.
Yeah, see, I don't know that this is.
Just outside city limits, apparently within 3 miles of the city limits, Paramedics Plus covers. But there's been issues with delay in having an ambulance go out, especially when they're already very, very busy inside the city limits. And so I was just wondering how it was determined, because sometimes the patients that are outside the city limits are waiting an extreme amount of time.
Sure.
And there's an ambulance there waiting and ready to go, but they're not invited, and so they don't come.
I think you're talking about that in sort of a general terms.
Right, right.
And, that, so.
I just did the figures, and I figured that for every ambulance in Sioux Falls, there's 1,327 calls per ambulance per year. But with the MedStar, it was something like 110. So there's a dramatic difference, and obviously Paramedics Plus is very busy, but I was wondering how that is determined.
So, I don't know if Dr. Luther, you're having some experience in the county. I'm not sure about that 3 mile piece. I'm not sure what you're referring to about that 3 miles. Dr. Luther, do you have?
Well,
any?
Paramedics Plus does have a primary service area in the county, and that was recently defined. And the county ordinance currently, our requirements are different. They have, each primary service area has 60 seconds to acknowledge the call, and then 10 minutes to be in response. They have to be responding within 10 minutes. And that's all that the ordinance, that's all that we measure for the county ordinance. So fractile times are much, much different in the city limits than they are in these primary service areas because of the county ordinance, which is what we're looking at right now. We had the Fitch study just completed, and they've made some recommendations about applying some fractal times in the county.
Right.
And we've got work groups right now in process on how to look at that. Some of the concerns in the county are that we have a volunteer service, and some of those services are part-time basic life support and part-time advanced life support. The two ALS services that we have in the county are Paramedics Plus, full-time paid is Paramedics Plus and MedStar. And so we're looking at ways to incorporate that. That's why there's 4 different work groups working on governance, recruitment, retention, training, and quality assurance, and a medical advisory board of some sort.
And that's what my question was. In this report, they list Del Rapids, Garrettson, Humboldt, MedStar, all the times, but they never mentioned Paramedics Plus and didn't give any specifics.
It seems like we're getting into county business a little bit, and I don't know that that's necessarily what we want to talk about here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's just that being in between the two systems puts it at us at a significant disadvantage in getting timely care. That's all I was trying to work on.
Okay, do you have, all right, Mike?
I would be happy to address that. So in terms of the data, the reason being there is at the time of the Fitch study, we had not been a county provider. That entire area had belonged to MedStar, and then after negotiations within the county and in a plan put forward by MedStar, those borders were redrawn. So at the time that that study was completed, I had not really been responding to calls in the county. That change had come. The change in contract in the county had come.
After 2015?
Yeah.
Okay, because this
So
goes
it's just a
back
matter
to
of timeline.
2015.
So if they were to do one next year, then my data would be present. It was just a matter that we're at the very end of that data collection.
Okay.
So there is very little data for me to be able to give, though I'm sure that was given, I believe, through Metro to Fitch. So I imagine any data we had went directly from Metro to Fitch.
Does
That answers the question,
Thank you.
because there's
Thanks,
all
Mike.
this information, 79 pages, but there's nothing about what they say is currently going on.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you. Sir?
I asked the fire chief here.
Sure.
You said something about the firemen only in the city limits have these, that they can respond when on duty to a emergency call. What if a fireman lives just like us, just outside the edge of the city? Wouldn't that be advantageous for him, like with this ambulance system, where he could probably be there quicker if the ambulances are all tied up?
Yep, and the way that would work is, we talk about in the city limits, if the call comes in within the city limits, that's the way the system is set up through Pulse Point through Metro Communications. So if we have a verified responder that might be just outside the city limits, and it's a verified responder, he has that app, you know, he's in there, he'll be notified of that call in the city limits.
Brad, you might want to talk about the difference between verified responder and what you might be asking about with actual 911 call and the response. Are you asking about 911 response or the verified responder app?
And I think when he was talking about the Verified Responder Act, it was only in the city limits is what I'm thinking I'm understanding. But I guess my question is, if a fireman lives just outside the city limits, like a mile or half mile or whatever it happens to be, would he not be considered in that if there was an emergency in that area that would actually put him closer than anybody else?
If it was outside the city limits?
Yes.
It doesn't work that way through Pulse Point, Metro Communication. It doesn't, the Pulse Point app is for this response system within the city limits.
Just the city limits?
Yeah.
It seems to me that it would help if that, like, you know, if you live just outside the city limits, where you could respond, because if the ambulances are all tied up and busy, this is a lot of time. A guy sits there in a matter of, you're having a heart attack, a matter of 2 or 3 minutes to make the difference.
Well, we would encourage the county to look at the Verified First Responder app as well for their systems. I mean, that would be the answer to that, is that if the county were to adopt a verified, first of all, a Pulse Point app, and then look at a Verified First Responder program, then the county could address that. The other thing that needs to be considered, Brad, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to make sure that those responders are covered appropriately. And so sending them outside their area without proper coverage puts them at risk. So that is a consideration as well. But I think, to your question, sir, really, we need to make sure that our first responsibility is the city. And then outside of the city, we would encourage the county to work, and Dr. Luther being medical director for the county, of course, he's hearing your concerns as well, to bring that to the county. If there's more that can be done outside of the city limits, I think that's a great idea.
Well, again, this is a pilot program, and then the dispersal map is in the city limits with the pulse point and now the verified medical responders. And you can see where they're all located. And if I'm not mistaken, Brad, that's Phillips is the one that chose the city based on our activities with the pulse point to pick us for that verified medical responders. But I think it's a great idea. I mean, absolutely, if we can go forward and get that app out in the country or in the outside the city limits with the AEDs, because each one of those verified medical responders has in their possession an AED with them at all times. And so they respond into private locations and they're identified, they wear vests, and so it's just, and it's very new in its infancy. Again, we're the only second city, so if we get some time, I think we'll have some very good data and make some possibilities about extending that too soon, I'm hoping.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. Over here? Oh, well, I was going to leave city council till the end, if you didn't mind. But go ahead, you're next in line.
Okay, well, and I know Pat's counselor.
I was trying to make this for public comment, and I kind of saw you differently as the only thing.
Oh, well, I know Counselor Pat Starr was here a few months ago talking with you, so our attorney David Feifley has told me I'm not supposed to talk to boards, but I'm here because you were, Gary, were at our council meeting, I'm assuming representing the whole REMSA board?
The REMSA board.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, and so I just wanted to respond to the comments that you made at the city council.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and what I want to say, you made, I took it as an inference that any scrutiny I put on the system is somehow a commentary on the employees of Paramedics Plus. And I have said publicly, I'm going to say it now, I have the utmost respect for those people. I spent 7 hours in your ambulance last summer. I talked with these people, I listened to them. I think they're doing a great job. Okay, so it's nothing against them. But I will also say, as a council member, I have scrutiny coming against me all the time. I think for a governmental agency, it's really healthy for our community to be open to the media, to be open to answering questions. The worst thing we could do is to try to hide or be defensive about it, okay? Because we all, Christine Erickson said it at our meeting the other day, we want the best for our citizens. We want them to be safe and serve us to the best of our ability. So whatever I can do, I'm learning about my limits as far as what the contract is. Apparently, we don't have much input into the contract, although we are called to sign it and to approve rate increases. So I just wanted to say for the record that I support the employees.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I appreciate that greatly, thank you.
Back there? Yeah, Jim.
I've been gone the last couple of weeks during the city commission meetings. We have a race rescue team. We travel around the country. We've been following sprint cars. But I've been watching those when I've gotten back. And I think there's a lot here that maybe you, REMSA board, aren't even aware of. And I want to bring that to your attention now so we can get this matter cleared up once and for all.
Sure.
First off, I agree with Councilor Teresa there, is that you've got employees that work for MedStar working for you. And of course it's not the employees that have anything to do with this business aspect of what we're talking about here. And of course the employees on any ambulance service should never be involved in being called names or anything else. This isn't about employees. It's above that level. So I agree with her when it comes to Paramedics Plus employees. In fact, I bought for you guys candy bars in parking lots before. So
Thank you.
all right, so that we can agree on. And Fire Chief, congratulations. My father was a Sioux Falls fireman for years. He dedicated his life to that. He started the EMS services on the Sioux Falls Fire Department. I have a love for the fire department. And I talk with those guys on the streets a lot. I've got a lot of friends there. I want to talk about the mutual aid. There's been a lot of misconception about the mutual aid agreement. Number one is I'm not sure that the health director or the REMSA people should be saying what I said or didn't say, because I've not talked to them. They have no idea whether I said I would sign it, not sign it, or anything else. And I've watched these meetings, and I have representatives from the city standing up and saying what I said. And I refuse to sign it for this reason or that reason, or whatever this reason is. We did have a meeting with Paramedics Plus, and there were several of us there, and that wasn't the only topic. There's many other topics that came up at that meeting. That was one of them. I will talk about what we are requiring to sign a mutual aid agreement. I will tell you, 3.5 weeks ago, we were called into the city again. We don't have a mutual aid agreement here. We were called into the city 3.5 weeks ago, 20 minutes after the priority 2 call came in. It took us 12 minutes to get there. 32 minutes after this call comes in, we responded to the city, took care of this patient, and transported them to the hospital. That's my number one problem with the mutual aid agreement right there. A mutual aid agreement is not to make somebody wait 22 minutes. A mutual aid agreement, as it is in the county, is if you have nothing available, you send something. You don't put it into a fictitious little file of a 980 or what, level 0, level 5, whatever you want to call this. And what was happening to us, sir, and let me just, I'll speak with you. What was happening in the past, and this is why we had our discussion with Paramedics Plus. We had 24 calls into the city. We have never, ever, ever refused to come in and take a mutual call, ever. So I want that to be out there, and we wouldn't refuse today. We were called into the city. Out of all those times, we transported one patient. The other times, we could actually see the house, and we were called away because something became available at a hospital someplace. We were turned around. Now, every time we're turned around, and forget about the 10-minute delay it is, again, for the patient to get somebody at their door to transport them, forget about that. On the business side, when I send somebody into the city to back up the city, then I also have to staff in the county again. And so that all financially costs money. We talked to P Plus about that. And we said, listen, if, I don't need that from you right now, ma'am. This is me talking. If we,
Please keep it simple, Jim.
I'm sorry. If we come into this city and we sign a refusal, I don't want to be paid for that. That was the perception out there. I want to be paid for every time I came into the city. We don't want to be paid for a refusal. What we're saying is, when a call comes in and there's not a call available, there's not an ambulance available, you dispatch us. 12 minutes for that call took us to get there. I'm the one who transported. On that unfortunate accident with that four-wheeler, it took us 13 or 14 minutes to get there after we were dispatched.
Also, I really want to be careful about talking about particular calls.
Sure.
I really have to be careful about that in this forum.
Well, I'll be careful about it. But what I'm saying is the delay in calling us is my problem. I'm from this area. I have family in this area. I have respect for the EMS system in this area. There's many good things that Paramedics Plus does, REMSA does. I think one of the poor things is you don't ask for help when you need it. Very poor. So why would I sign a mutual aid agreement when you're already calling me when it gets down to that point where you have nobody? A mutual aid agreement, as far as I'm concerned, has a benefit to my competitor, to me, but more importantly, the benefit is to the person who needs the mutual aid. It's not about how he looks or how I look at that point. I'm happy to sign one today if we can come up with an arrangement and says, we're going to do this not for the good of any business or to make us look good or to be in compliance. We all know there's a difference of compliance and actual work. Compliance is the level you have to meet. If we're 90% compliance, 2 people in this room stand up and fall down because you're going to be waiting for an ambulance if we're 90% compliant. But that would meet standards. We could say, oh, we're 100% because they meet compliance. I'm not talking about compliance. I'm talking about what's best for the people of the city, for the county, for the state. I'm talking about a mutual aid agreement that says, when there's no ambulance available, we'll call you, you continue that call. If it's a priority 1 call, and somebody frees up at a hospital, by God, head there, whoever gets there first, take that call. It's a life-threatening call. So, I'm here to tell you right now, first off, nobody should have spoke for me at those meetings except maybe P+, because nobody else was there at the meeting. Nobody from your board was there representing anybody. So all the people from your board, all they know is what they were told. And they weren't told that from me.
Yeah, sure. That's why I'm glad you're here today.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So if people are gonna speak for me, and now I gotta answer questions to the public about why I did or didn't do something, that also sits bad on my company. Because people listen to people up there talking, and then it comes back as, really, why won't you sign that? Oh, you're greedy, you want money. It has nothing to do with it. We were mutual aided out to Wildwater West and signed off a person. It took us 35 minutes to get there. There's a call, I don't know which call, I won't talk about the call, but that person waited 45 minutes, 8 minutes from our doorstep, and we weren't mutual aided. Those are the kind of things that have to stop. So I'm willing to meet with the REMSA group. I'm willing to meet with Paramedics Plus and anybody else that's truly concerned about patient care and doing the right thing. Because otherwise, I'm not signing. I'm not signing to do what we're doing today, because that's ridiculous.
Sure.
You can call me and let the city know right now. Call me anytime you need me. We'll be here, my company will be here, and we'll give you everything we have. But to sign an agreement, it has to mean something. And I hope that makes that very clear.
Thanks,
I
Jay.
just want to make sure there's enough time for getting here.
And I appreciate, and I'll let you, if you
Yes.
have anything to add,
That's
okay. I appreciate you coming and joining the REMSA meeting. As far as I've been the chair, you've not been to one, I don't think, so thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I do want to make sure, and I appreciate your comments, and we will address those specific comments. Not today, obviously, there's nothing that we can do today. But I do want to make sure that you and everyone else understands that the contract for mutual aid is not with REMSA, not with the city. So there's nothing that I can do there's nothing that REMSA can sign, there's nothing the city can sign. That is an agreement between you and another company.
Well, thank you. And so that would make my point even stronger, is why is somebody from REMSA standing up saying what I will or won't do?
There was
If it has
nobody-
nothing to do with this.
So somebody from REMSA stood up? and
Is Joe
said
Franken with REMSA?
No.
And is Julie Charbonneau with REMSA?
No,
Those two are not from REMSA?
no. And that's been explained a couple of different times, I think, to the media and to city council, that REMSA is this board. The 5 members that sit
Well,
up
okay,
here,
that needs to be put out there too.
that has, that has.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely has been said to the city council and to media, that REMSA, the Regional EMS Response Authority, is this group right here.
Well, good, we can probably talk to you guys.
Sure,
So-
anytime.
Yeah, and that's a good point, I'm happy to hear
Yeah.
that. But I will say, the city of Sioux Falls had never had to stand up and talk for me either then.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, you bet. I'm kind of trying to stay, I know this gentleman's been waiting here at the far end, and I want to make sure he has an opportunity as well. But before, was there anything that you had to add, sir? Try to be as fair as I can, so, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. My name is Brian Neal, and unfortunately, the case that he was alluding to was my baby boy. It was my son who died on that four-wheeler. It was an unfortunate accident, and I accept it as that. Afterwards, some information did come across my attention that got my attention. And let me apologize, first of all, because I'm a layman, so a lot of the things that you're talking about, I don't understand, okay? It was brought to my attention that a priority 1 is a life or death situation, and there is a time restriction.
Yes, sir.
Like, if I'm not mistaken, 7 minutes or less.
Under 8, right?
Under 8.
8:59,
8:59.
90% of the time.
8:59, 90% of the time,
Okay.
sir.
And it was brought to my attention that my son's ambulance took 20 to 22 minutes getting there. And one of the statements that's been made to me that so many times by people was the fact that because of his injuries, it wouldn't have made a difference no way, which I think is a terrible thing to say to a parent. Because to say that really lets me know that you're really not seeing the big picture. You know, I mean, everybody in here, the most greatest nightmare you can imagine is for your wife, your son, your granddaughter to need an ambulance and it's not available.
Absolutely.
Now, as a layman, I do not know how policies are made, but in my mind, I would think that if it was up to me to hire an ambulance service, I would need that ambulance service to be up to spec. In other words, you know, like the Marines say, we leave no man behind. I mean, what is acceptable losses? What is acceptable, you know, even if it's 1 out of 100, who wants to be that one? You know, so as a layman, I would think, well, maybe joint forces would get a couple of teams. I wouldn't mind my tax dollars Raise my taxes if you have to, so that you can have enough ambulances available, you know, for this situation. It's unheard of to call an ambulance and there's not one available. I don't know policy. You know, I asked you to forgive me for that, but I need someone to explain to me. And let me say this first, because I've been accused of being, and this is terrible, as looking for someone to sue. I've been accused of chasing dollars because of my son's death. And believe me, it's insulting for someone to try to figure my motives. If I felt someone was wrong in this, I'd been in court already. I'm not looking to sue nobody. My son made a bad decision, and as a result of that, he lost his life. There's nobody's blame. But the fact of the matter is, there was no ambulance available. That's the issue. Everybody in here in this room should be worried about that. You have family, you have grandchildren, children. You wouldn't want to imagine them laying there needing help and there's no help available. I need to know what decisions go into choosing the service. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
How do you determine what service? What is the criteria whether this particular service has the capacity to serve the people?
Sure.
That's what I need to know.
That's a big question. So let me first start by saying I'm very sorry for your loss, and I truly mean that. I was a responder before, and I know I've talked to a lot of family members like yourself over the years, so I do
Thank you,
apologize
sir.
for your loss. Thank you for coming. It's very difficult for this board, and again, this is a REMSA board meeting. We're not privy as board members, as citizen volunteers, to know the level of detail about your call, your son's call, or I do know, I mean, your call was in the media, your son's call was in the media, so I'm familiar with it, but I don't know anything about it. We are not given that amount of information about, you know, what happened in particular for that call. That's not our job. But to answer, I think your bigger question is what goes into making sure we have adequate coverage and service in this city, and how do we choose an ambulance service? Is that a very good summary?
Which should be all of our question, actually.
Yeah, I agree. That's why why the members of REMSA sit up here. And I hope that the two of you feel comfortable weighing in as well. I think it is our job. We have the contract that you've heard a lot about, the ambulance contract. That's the job of REMSA, the Department of Health, the City Council, to put together that contract and make sure that it says everything that we want as a city for our ambulance service, and evaluate those ambulance services. Mr. Major's service was one of the services that also put in for the contract, and evaluate all of the ambulance services based on a lot of criteria and score them. And we had actually outside professionals come into our city, so that it was very unbiased, to score that. And based on that process, we determined who meets those requirements, and they get the ambulance contract. So that's how we choose who covers the city of Sioux Falls. In a very, that's my summary, doesn't cover everything. From that point forward, then this group, including this REMSA board, focuses all of our attention on making sure that whoever has the ambulance contract is doing the best job possible for the city.
Do you feel it's working?
Yes, I do.
So the numbers that was brought to my attention, correct me if I'm wrong, please, I'm open for reproof and correction. So the numbers where there was over 600 instances in a couple of year period that there were no ambulances available at all, those are fictitious numbers?
No, I think probably it's the misconception of the statement.
Please explain what you mean.
So in any community, whether that be Sioux Falls or Brandon or a community with one ambulance, there are going to be times when all ambulances are doing something, no matter how big or small.
That's acceptable?
It has to be in a system of care in any city. New York City, Chicago Fire. There are times when people are going to wait for ambulances.
So
Sir,
you're
I
saying,
just wanna-
excuse
I
me,
need to bring in-
please.
I don't want this-
I have a problem with remembering, so if you allow
Very
me,
good.
yeah.
Okay, let's
See,
look.
I just don't forget myself. So is that to say that there's acceptable losses?
I don't like to consider it acceptable losses. what I think what we want to talk about is the full system of care. And so I think that, and this is a perception in the community that you have, because based on the information that you've been given, and the rest of the community has, is that if an ambulance is not there, the person is not being cared for. That's the perception I think that you may have, and correct me if I'm wrong.
You know how many people have been telling me what I think since this happened?
I want to hear from you, because you're sitting here.
It's not that, because you know what, first of all, I don't really blame, I think the fire department, they were right down the street, they got there. So I know, I realized that my son's injuries were, he wasn't going to survive them anyway.
Sure.
I realized that. So no, my perception isn't that he didn't get care.
Okay.
The numbers don't lie. By your own standard, you say a priority 1 should be there. Let's just say 10 minutes.
Okay.
It was 22.
Sure.
I'm not the brightest bulb in the you know, but that just don't add up to me.
Sure.
You know, maybe I'm missing something.
No, you're right. You're
You
right.
know?
And so that call, that particular call, and I don't know the details, so I'm talking in generalities here. That call or any call like that would have been reviewed by the city's health, by Julie, who's, Julie, say your title.
Emergency Medical Quality Assurance Coordinator.
By Julie, by Dr. Luther, by all parties involved, that call was reviewed. And it's unfortunate, very unfortunate, that some of those more serious calls, that there is a need to review those, but every one of those calls is reviewed. Now, is the answer somebody needs to lose their job or we fire the fire department, or fire the ambulance department? No. Quality assurance is not about leveling a gavel against any one person or organization. It's about making sure that we're doing the best we can. Your question, I believe, is that should we be trying for 100% response time for everyone? And in my position as a REMSA citizen volunteer, and there will be people that will disagree with me, yourself included, that 100% is nearly impossible in healthcare in general. Whether you go to the emergency department or whether you're waiting for an ambulance. But what I want to bring back to what I was saying earlier is that care. Care is what you need to make to the number of when your son or anyone else had care at their side. That's the number we need to focus on. Not when the big white
You're
box
right, I
showed
do
up.
disagree with you, sir.
Okay.
Because you can get all the care in the world, but if you can't get to the hospital, then the care, what if they don't have on that ambulance the equipment needed to sustain life?
Sure.
So what they're doing is really, in a sense of speaking, futile if you can't get to to the hospital.
Right.
And I'm a layman, so I know I don't understand this, but is there such thing, well, let's hire 2 companies, let's make sure we got enough. You know, there's a lot of things that they take our tax dollars for that we disagree with. I would be glad to increase my taxes and use that to employ more services.
Okay.
Let's make sure, let's not think that we're immune to what just happened to me.
Right.
That can happen to you. You know what I'm saying? This can happen to anyone. Whenever they say 99 to 1, somebody got to be that one.
Yep.
Who wants to?
Nobody.
So what I'm saying is, can't we do something to make sure that there's enough ambulances available? Even if if it's expensive, let's come up with the funds. Ask us if we're willing to pay more taxes or whatever we got to do to make it happen.
Sure.
You know, it was my son this time. It can be yours next time. You know, I'm a part, it's too late for me, but I am a part of this community, you know? And it's a humanitarian type of thing now with me. You know, do you think I really want to be here? I got 8 children, I just lost my baby boy. The last thing I want to do is to be talking about this situation. But you know, now it's not even about me anymore. It's about a service, it's about your grandkids, your kids. So now I have to take on a cause that I really don't have the energy for, but it has to be fixed. I don't have the answers, I don't, but I do know that it needs to be fixed.
All right, so I appreciate, again, your comments and being here today. And like I said at the outset, we can't make any decisions.
I
You know,
understand.
I'm not going to say, yes, we need to do this or that. We don't have that.
And let me go on the record to say, I blame nobody.
Thank you.
No one. I have the utmost respect for our ambulances, for our fire department, all of our first responders. What happened to my son was an accident out of his own negligence, I'm sad to say. You know, so it's not a matter of me blaming anybody, the fact that he didn't survive, but the numbers don't lie.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that, because,
Sure.
you know, we want to make sure that we don't forget about the individual. That's very important. It was brought up at the council meeting the other day too. We can't forget about the individual, so thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, sir.
Nothing can be done today, obviously.
Okay.
But rest assured that I will find out more information, and it will have to be at the medical board meeting, because that's the closed door meeting to talk about particular patient cases and see if we can get more information as a REMSA board.
I appreciate
And
that.
see if there's anything that should and could be done.
Thank you.
And we'll take it from there. Is that a
Absolutely.
sufficient answer today?
For right now, yes, sir.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, thanks, Brian, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thought there was, yes, sir.
I'm Bruce Danielson. As somebody who's had family members use ambulance services here and other places 7 times in the last couple of years, a lot of things have made me interested in this whole process. In fact, I have a family member that has been helped by Sioux Falls Fire and Rescue and Paramedics Plus multiple times here in town because of her disability and seizures and this type of thing. And even though I dealt with it, Paramedics Plus was right there. When there were about 20,000 people downtown, they got to her, they got to me. They watched me do what I did, but it was gratifying that both were there to help, and I appreciate that. And so I don't come to this discussion, you know, not understanding what fire rescue and Paramedics Plus and ambulance services and the work that you guys do as board members. You know, all we're doing as we look into this whole 980 issue and all these other things that go on are how can we make it better so we don't have to have a phantom ambulance system. As somebody who's spent a career of doing queuing theory, I understand what you're trying to accomplish using queuing theory is where if you're trying to get something done, you staff according to what the queue is. In other words, you go into the grocery store and all of a sudden there's a big line. They have a queuing theory that says if there's more than 3 people in line, you open up another register.
Sure.
In other words, that's what Paramedics Plus is, my understanding is what you're trying to do with the way that your system is set up here in town. Instead of having full staff at all of these different outposts, you work with this. Well, I have some real disagreements with, in what I'm researching so far, how that system is working. As somebody who was involved to an extent down in Sioux City during United 232, that scares the hell out of me, seeing the way that we run the ambulance service here. I saw how Sioux City was working together with all the communities and having all of these dozens of communities being able to drop ambulances into Sioux City within minutes, and the work that the hospitals were ready. One of the questions I have for this board, because this is the regional emergency management, is what kind of a program do we have for in case we ever had a 232 here? It scares me a lot. I had friends that were EMS. I've had friends who were funeral directors. Police officers from the Sioux City area, all the way up to Beersford and Canton, even Sioux Falls, that got involved in all of this. And I went down to help because I was nearby and I had done some emergency work. So I went down to see what I could do to help out, and they threw you into stuff. And so this isn't just a Johnny-come-lately thing for me. I've had it for, if you remember when 232 was, that was, I believe, in '89. So I've been at it a while.
Can I answer that one?
Yeah.
Or throw out an answer, I should say.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. So that, I think, mass casualty, mutual aid or emergency aid from surrounding communities, I think that's a different issue. I don't think any community is staffed.
Sioux City was ready.
I agree, and I think we would
And
too.
I want to know, and that's something that we don't have to have an answer for today, but I would really like to know, and so would a wider range of the community would like to know, because it used to be a big newspaper and TV splash when we would have these exercises at the airport
Yeah, we still
or
do,
out
right?
on this
Yeah.
road.
Just went to one, too.
People have been asking me, do they ever do that anymore? And so we're just asking, is everybody on the same
I think we have an answer for
communication
you.
system?
There was an
And-
airport safety meeting, I think 2 weeks ago. We went through tabletop exercise and I think.
Well, but see, what some of my friends got involved in down in Sioux City was they actually showed up, just like here in Sioux Falls many years ago.
Yeah, I think that's
where
done
they had the
every-
exercises out at the airport and
Sure.
actually
Bruce, you have to let
as
us
if a
answer.
bus crashed and.
You have questions
exactly
and we
what
can
we went
answer.
through.
Yeah, we
So-
can answer those. So is it every other year they do a full scale? or-
Every year,
Yep.
every year.
When will the next one be done, do you know?
It was done in 2016, so 2018.
Okay.
That includes everybody in the county is either notified, and I think it's up to if you're available, if you actually want to respond, if you're from the county, but they're all notified, is from what I remember.
Does that include Lincoln County to be involved? Is that, I'm just saying, because in Sioux City, they went, Storm Lake, they went quite a big ring, bringing people in from Nebraska, South Dakota. And
I would imagine this
You know,
very
so-
same thing would happen here. I mean, as far as the word going out for mutual aid.
But the word going out, they had everybody's phone numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, it was.
I think the mutual aid process for a mass casualty is fairly well thought out and designed and practiced in this community.
So, then a couple weeks ago, I was driving up the interstate and there was an accident at the Sanford Sports Complex. And there were 5 people injured in that accident while there were a whole series of 980s going on. And they finally got an ambulance out there to take those 5. My understanding is I got there just after the ambulance supposedly left. So, so we had a large, 5 people being hauled to the hospital, and it looked like in one ambulance. That was what I had been. So I know you can't get into that because that's, beyond your purview. But this is what we see as we're out in the community, and we want to know, if we can't have enough ambulances on the road for an accident with 5 people, how can we expect, the rest of it to go? And if you're in a 980 situation and you get a priority 1, why do we have to wait the 12 minutes or whatever it is to get somebody else called in to come in and do that call? Listening to all of these individuals talking, we want to know if,
I can
why
answer
does
that
that
question.
have to wait for, why can't Metro just go ahead and call the first available ambulance? Even if it's from Parkston and they're driving through town. I'm just saying,
Well, I'm ready to answer as soon as you're done
Okay.
with your question.
Well,
Julie, can,
the last part of it, my thing was, just compliance versus patient care. We keep hearing about that we're contract compliant, but we seem to be missing on patient care.
I
And that's-
disagree.
And that's where I leave it.
I disagree with that 100%. So, thank you.
Well, I'm not seeing patient care from the individuals that are on the street, but I'm seeing more when it comes time. I've been collecting all the 980 calls for the last several months and been looking at all of them. And I'm looking at the compliance reports that I've just seen, and I don't understand why all of these 980s aren't up on that board. They should be reported with every one of those reports.
So I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to ask Julie to answer your previous question, if that's okay.
Okay.
So, I think there's a misconception about what the 980 designation. Let's say that there are 2 ambulances. Let's use the smallest numbers possible. There are 2 ambulances and they're both out doing something, anywhere from responding to a call to at the hospital. There's 2 of them. That's all that's in the city at that time. I don't think that ever happens where there's only 2, but I'm going to use 2. And they're both out there. And another call comes in. Okay, clock starts, right? We're all in agreement that that's when the clock starts, is when the call comes in. And if both ambulances are out, a 980 notification may go out to those 2 ambulances, okay? That doesn't mean that if one of those 2 ambulances comes available within 1 or 2 minutes, the clock is still starting, that they could respond and not be outside of that 10-minute P1 response time. So the reason that that's not reported is because nothing bad happened. Do you
But when
understand?
I'm listening to the scanner, you know, through this whole process, and I'm hearing the fire rescue saying, where's the ambulance, where's an ambulance? And variations of that, you know, that's what you're hearing. And you know that a 980's been called. You know, why wasn't MedStar called?
So I think I just answered your question. You said you've got a lot of them. You've heard lots and lots of them, apparently.
Right.
So remember that when you hear 980, that's not a bad thing. That is a designation that there is a call pending and that there is not an ambulance at post. So during a 980, there is not an ambulance at post. They are all somewhere else.
I understand that.
Okay? So when a 980 goes out, one of the ambulances that's at the hospital that hasn't gone back to post yet is notified through that 980 designation, and they say, oh, we can take it, and they go. The clock never starts over. The clock started at the beginning of the call like it always does. The clock doesn't start over, and that ambulance on a priority 1 still often makes it under that 10-minute, or 9:59, correct? 8:59, excuse me. So it doesn't fall out, it's still in compliance, so just because it's called and the calls are not called 980, it is a message that goes out to all ambulances that there is a 980, so that means there is a call pending. But they can still respond and meet all compliance.
But how are they going to meet compliance when I've been watching as many as 5 980s? I see 980, 981, 982, 983, 984, all stacked up, and
Transfers. Well, transfers. Interfacility transfers don't take up the last available ambulance. So you might see 3 980 pages go out because there's somebody waiting for a transfer from one hospital to the other within the next 90 minutes. And another transfer may come in for another transfer that needs to be within the next 90 minutes, and maybe another. And this does happen, that we'll see numerous transfers at once. So a call is pending. It's not an emergency, it's prioritized. It's an interfacility transfer. Then say a priority 2 call comes in, that's going to get the next available ambulance. Not those interfacility transfers, those wait because they're stable patients who are already in a healthcare facility. So the fact that you see several happen at once doesn't mean several patients are going to get a response outside the 8:59, 11:59, 15:59. And the fact that there's a 980 designation on a transfer doesn't even mean there was no ambulance. It means the last ambulance is staying available for an emergency.
Well,
So counting the number of 980 pages in no way means how many times an ambulance wasn't available.
well, and I can give you one night in particular, and I won't go into that in detail here, except to say that I happened to witness an evening in May when there were 5 980 calls, and they were doing hospital transfers at the same time. And the 980s stacked up, and it was a bad night for a few people.
I think Julie just explained that, but
But apparently, you know, there weren't any other, there were actually, there was a supervisor vehicle, and as I understand, the supervisor vehicle designation, and then 2 ambulances on the road that night. And it was a busy weekend night, and I'm still trying to put together all of the medical histories that I'm able to find on each of those, but I didn't see it on the report. You know, I should have seen that priority 1 that was called and got shifted down to a priority 3, and they were made to lay there and wait. So I won't go into all of that at this point because I don't want to get argumentative.
Sure.
But there are all of these other things that are going on, and I just want to say that I'm involved in this not as a Johnny-come-lately, but as somebody who's actually had a very strong interest in this whole field, you know, for over 45 years. So I just want to let you know that I'm looking at it for those reasons.
thank you, Bruce, thank you for coming.
You bet.
And thank you for sharing your comments. And I think the most important part of all the comments is that everyone here has heard the comments and that it'll be things that we talk about. So I appreciate everyone joining. Was there anybody that we missed? one thing? Yes.
I shot that accident that came out of the Pentagon for
We have to be careful about talking in particular calls, please.
No, that one. There was 2 ambulances and a third coming on that accident. That's all I'm telling you, so there was no shortage there. That's all
Okay,
I'm
and
telling you.
thank you for
Yep.
adding that.
Yep.
Again, I don't know specifics, we as the board don't know specifics, so thank you
Yep.
for adding. Okay, well, if nothing else, I do want to move into executive session. There is something that I do want to talk to Dave Fifley about, as he's in the back of the room, so we will go into executive session.
Y'all come back now, dear.
Security, escort this gentleman out, please.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.